Yeah, so I will. That's a very fitting topic to speak about Prabhupada. As I've said many times, when I first saw Prabhupada, actually saw him in Berkeley, California, in what is still called the International House, where the foreign students would stay. My first impression was that he was a spiritual commander. And I could immediately, I was 20 years old, and as you know, 20-year-old boys, especially in Berkeley back then, were... Anyway, somehow or other I managed to find the front door and walk in and sit down, which was... So, but I understood that Prabhupada was... I understood. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. I don't know if I'd heard of Bhagavad Gita. But I just knew this person is a spiritual authority, the way he carried himself. And the next time, after that meeting, the next time I saw Prabhupada was to be initiated. This time in Los Angeles. And I was so nervous, I don't remember very much of what happened, other than that I was very nervous. And then, you know, that Prabhupada gave me the name, and I... Well, in those days, I mean, no one ever could remember what Prabhupada actually said to them when he gave the name, because... So the custom was that after the ceremony, all the new initiates would get a little piece of paper with their name on it. So when I looked at my paper and saw H-R-I, it seemed like such an impossible combination of letters. H-R-I, the Dayananda part seemed phonetically in the ballpark, so to speak, but the H-R-I was, I thought, this is, no, obviously whoever wrote it, because Prabhupada's secretary is right, I said, obviously it's a mistake, it must be Hridayananda. I had, I guess, what Prabhupada used to call a very fertile brain. Somewhat sarcastic remark he would make. And so, and Hridayananda, of course, means something in Sanskrit. It means the bliss of the mercy of Hari. So I told everyone, my name is Hridayananda. And it sounded kosher to everyone. So I became sort of self-baptized Hridayananda Das Brahmachari, and that's who I was, and everybody called me that. And then I saw Prabhupada again, and he sent me to Boston to work in ISKCON Press, and somehow that was 1970. So I happened to write Prabhupada a letter for some reason, and I signed it Hridayananda. He wrote me back, by the way, your name is Hridayananda. But story of my life. So if you look at the old Back to Godhead magazines, which you can find online, there is an article in 1970 by Hridayananda Das Brahmachari, and about the Lord Chaitanya festival in Berkeley the year before. So when I took sannyasa in 1972, I had the chance to see Prabhupada more often because, you know, that was kind of an upgrade. And I began traveling and preaching all around the United States. Prabhupada liked our program very much. In fact, Prabhupada was giving a Nectar of Devotion class in Vrindavan in 1972, and he mentions our program. I was with Satsarupa Goswami, and Prabhupada said, so, 2 Goswamis, referring to us, are traveling and preaching in the Midwest, USA, and at the colleges. So Prabhupada liked that program very much. Then I'm sort of skipping very quickly, but I sort of want to come to the conclusion. But in 1974, I was in Mayapur for the first annual Mayapur festival, and Satsarupa came to my room and said, "Prabhupada wants to see you." And I said, "What did I do now?" I thought, "Oh my God, what did I do?" So he just laughed and said, "No, it's good news." So then I walked into Prabhupada's room and I saw the whole GBC was there. Don't have a panic attack. Anyway. So the GBC was there, and Prabhupada was so, what's the word? He was so absorbed in his mission, very, very sharp, always. So I have so many memories of offering obeisances to Prabhupada, and then he began speaking to me before I sat up. I mean, he just wanted to get down to business. It's like in 1971 when I was a householder president of Gainesville, and Prabhupada arrived in the Jacksonville airport, and in those days there was no airport security. So we went to the gate, and Prabhupada was coming through that tunnel, and I offered obeisances. I was just very young. I was 22. I wasn't thinking that if I offer all these devoted obeisances, Prabhupada just going to be standing there waiting for me. So I offered obeisances, and when I stood up, Prabhupada said, "Which way?" So then in 1974 in Mayapur, when I came in, Prabhupada said to me, "We were thinking," meaning he and the GBC, "we were thinking that you could be the GBC for Latin America." And of course that was the last thing in the world I expected. I can honestly say I'd never thought once in my life about being on the GBC. I was very happy with my program, but I think I said something like, "Yes, Prabhupada, that's your wish." And later I found out from some other friends of mine in the GBC that they couldn't figure out who should be on the GBC for Latin America, because there had been several GBCs of Latin America, but none of them had ever gone to Latin America. And so so they made a list of possible GBCs for Latin America. And then they went to Prabhupada's room. After every GBC meeting, morning and evening, afternoon, they would go to Prabhupada's room, and they read the list, and when they read my name, Prabhupada said, "Yes, he should do it." And Prabhupada said, "He can convince them." So it was when I walked out of Prabhupada's room, two things happened. Number one, a godbrother of mine who thought he should be the GBC of Latin America was very angry at me for having been so inconsiderate as to accept Prabhupada's order. But apart from that, as I still remember, as I walked out of Prabhupada's room and walked down the hall in the Mayapur building, I felt this empowerment come into my body. It was like I became one of the, I guess, X-Men, or I became a Vedic mutant or something, but to understand that you have to know different Vedic stories like the X-Men and the Avengers. But I actually felt this great empowerment just come into my body and mind, and suddenly it was like science fiction, where I could see things I couldn't see before. And I remember I flew back to America. After that, once I was appointed GBC, Prabhupada, I sort of had more access to Prabhupada. I could go to his room without getting thrown out. And Prabhupada gave me special instructions. He actually told me in his room, I didn't ask him, he just said to me, "Do not spend your time simply on rituals and puja." He said, "For the more advanced devotees," he said, "let the others do that. For the more advanced devotees, there's preaching and books." I remember he said that to me. And so I flew back to America. My Sankirtan probably had a group of brahmacharis, and we were in New Haven, Connecticut. If any of you know that, that's Yale University, or as they say in South America, Yale. And so we were at Estamos en Yale. We were at Yale, at Yale University, and so the first thing I did, actually, this is a true story, I swear to Govinda. When I got back, I had what I call the Bharata blues, which means that, dysentery and all that. And so I just knew instinctively what I needed to get better. So I told the devotees, bring me a peanut butter and jelly sandwich on Jewish rye bread and a 7-Up. I just knew that's what I needed. And so they brought it and I ate it and I was just like, I was fine. So then the next thing, Jewish rye bread is, I hope it's in the spiritual world. Anyway. So then the next thing I did was, I had the devotees buy this big wall map of South America. And I just put this big map of South America on the wall, and it came with a little book, tourist guide, all the main cities, Caracas, all the capitals like Caracas, Bogota, Quito, Ecuador, Lima, Peru, Santiago de Chile, Buenos Aires, and then Brazil. And I just started putting pins in all the important cities, and I just knew we were going to open up every one of these cities. Somehow Prabhupada and Krishna gave me this vision, we're just going to open this thing up. And it happened. Actually, it happened. So I next saw Prabhupada in 1974, actually same year, 74, because he came to San Francisco for the Ratha Yatra festival. And there were a few funny pastimes with Prabhupada there that showed he was very, what's the word? He was very kind to us as his spiritual children. So the temple at that point in San Francisco was not in the best neighborhood. It wasn't like a super dangerous neighborhood, but it wasn't in a super safe neighborhood either. And so I came back. I was staying, of course, in the same area where Prabhupada was staying. So I came back one evening for the temple, and Prabhupada, from the street, if you're looking from the street, there was a window. Prabhupada was on the second floor, and because it was late at night and the light was on in that window, and Prabhupada was sitting with his back to it, all you could see in the window was Prabhupada's head. And I became concerned, sort of in my rasa as Prabhupada's Jewish mother. I became concerned, and so I went up to Prabhupada's room. He was still up, and I said, Prabhupada, this is not the safest neighborhood, and so I think it's better that we move, if we could move your desk over, instead of where the window is, to the other wall. So he said, all right, if you like. So then, I called the devotees, and we acted really quickly, and Prabhupada stood up, and we moved his desk, and moved his seat, and it was all set up. Then I went to bed. The next morning, Prabhupada had his desk back where it was. By the window there. That's a quality of, actually the day he arrived, even before the evening he arrived in San Francisco, all the devotees were in his room, and of course he received many donations. There were devotees there from many parts of America, and devotees were giving him donations, cash or checks. And I was just sitting there praying, praying for service to Prabhupada. So he turned to me and said, here, write down all the check numbers. So I wrote down all the check numbers for Prabhupada, and then he just left the paper there. He never, but he gave me that service. So if I can actually go back a couple of years, in 1972, after I took sannyas in May of 1972, and then in I guess 3 months later, there was a famous festival. Became famous in history. The Vyas Puja and Janmashtami festival in New Vrindavan in 1972, and so many, hundreds. And it's probably the biggest festival ever held in North America at that time. And devotees came from all over the country to see Prabhupada. And there were many interesting pastimes with Prabhupada there. For one, Prabhupada was always so fearless. I mean, it was the second time I mean, twice, for example, Prabhupada was walking on one of these country roads, and this dog started barking, and Prabhupada just, everyone, we were all looking at each other, and Prabhupada just laughed and chased the dog away. You know, he knew hut, somehow hut, when Prabhupada said hut, dogs understood they had to leave. And actually, one time we were walking at Venice Beach in Los Angeles, and this dog, it was either a very large dog or a small horse, and it was, or a small barking horse. But anyway, we came back from the beach, and we came to the cars, and this big dog was barking. I remember Brahmananda was there, who just passed away. All these big devotees were there, and they were just looking at each other. This dog was quite large. And so while we were all looking at each other, Prabhupada just stepped forward and chased the dog away. So on Prabhupada's Vyas Puja Day, there was one devotee who was a GBC at that time. I won't mention his name, but he was something you hardly ever saw in the movement in those days. Someone really attached to controlling. That was a joke. And so, for some reason, he felt that no one could do anything for Prabhupada unless he approved it, and he had everything careful. He was a really good manager, carefully managed. So, on Prabhupada's Vyas Puja Day, Prabhupada, I think Vishnu Jana sang the Samsara prayers, which was very beautiful, and then Prabhupada asked the sannyasis to all stand up, and other senior devotees stand up, and just for 5 minutes say something, and then Prabhupada spoke, and then he was done. He wanted to go back to his house, and so he got down. He was walking down off the steps, and I saw this Uber manager was running around saying, "Where's the car? Where's Prabhupada's car?" And I just saw, oh my God, opportunity knocks. So I understood that there was a glitch and they couldn't find the car for Prabhupada. So I just ran to my little bright yellow, late model Volkswagen Beetle. And I just jumped in and like in about 10 seconds, my car was right in front of Prabhupada, and I jumped out and I said, "Prabhupada, your car is ready." So then Prabhupada got in the car. Meanwhile, the managing Maharaj was sort of like, I don't know if he was actually cursing, but he was definitely very angry and saying unpleasant things to me. And I was just laughing, as if I care, because I had Prabhupada in the car. So then I just drove Prabhupada through these winding mountain roads in New Vrindavan, and then I had another sort of existential crisis, like Prabhupada doesn't have a seatbelt on. And I thought, okay, I have to think of Prabhupada's safety, but I can't tell him what to do. So by the time I figured it out, we arrived. And then when we arrived at Prabhupada's house, there was another problem, and that is they had made all this wonderful prasadam for Prabhupada for his Vyas Puja and offered to him at the ceremony, but all the devotees mistakenly thought it was Maha, etc. prasadam, but actually it wasn't. So they all grabbed Prabhupada's prasadam and all the cake, and when Prabhupada got back to his house on his birthday, there was no prasadam for him. But Prabhupada remained very peaceful and tolerant. God, if it was me in my early guru days, I don't know what I would have done. But anyway, so then his Nandu Kumar was Prabhupada's servant. Then he said, he quickly cooked again. And then another funny pastime. It was funny in the sense that it was interesting. There were many pastimes that time. Prabhupada, that festival was really like the first grand national festival. Prabhupada was there, and there was a New York Times reporter, and all kinds of people had come from all over the country to see Prabhupada. And so there were many devotees in his room during Prabhupada's breakfast, and he was taking his breakfast, and devotees were sitting there. And then after the breakfast, because I was sitting right in front of Prabhupada, said to me, "You can distribute this." So I took Prabhupada's tray, and I went around the room giving everyone some Mahaprasadam. And then I began to worry again that, because we'd heard all these stories about Prabhupada. Even back then, there were actually more Prabhupada said stories even than today, if you can imagine that. And so I'd heard that Prabhupada had gotten very disturbed because in India, devotees were eating and not washing their hands. And in India, that's like, disgusting. If you eat and don't wash your hands, it's considered contaminated. And so after I gave everyone Mahaprasadam, and then I was thinking, oh my God, all these people are contaminated, ritually contaminated, and they're sitting here in front of Prabhupada, in front of the pure devotees. So I said to Prabhupada, should I, take some water around to so everyone can wash their hands? And he was like, are you serious? But then he said, all right, you can do it. So I took the water around, and everybody was washing their hands. And then I had a doubt. I thought, oh, these Prabhupada stories, because we always hear Prabhupada so concerned, wash your hands after you eat. But he didn't seem to be that pleased with me. So then I thought, maybe it's not so important to wash your hands. So that night, I actually came back to Prabhupada's house. I was staying in Prabhupada's house. I came back late that night. Lights were still on, so of course I ran into Prabhupada's room. And he was talking to Sudam Swami and maybe Nanda Kumar. And he just finished having some prasadam. So then he said to his servant, give some to me. And so I ate it, and I was just thinking, actually it's not so important to wash your hands. So I just finished eating. And Prabhupada looked at me and said, what is this? You're a so-called sannyasi, you don't wash your hands? So it was so funny. It was like a cartoon, because I immediately jumped to my feet. I was 23 years old then. I could still jump to my feet. If I jump to my feet now, Tarini will have her second emergency situation today. So anyway, I ran so fast at my danda. It was like a cartoon where I ran to the door and the danda was that way, and so I had to back up and then straighten my danda and run out again. Even as I did it, I was thinking, this is a cartoon. And so anyway, we had so many pastimes with Prabhupada, and then on Janmashtami evening, of course, Prabhupada said he wanted to hear a Krishna book. And I felt simultaneously ecstasy and a deep fear, because Prabhupada asked to begin reading Krishna book near 12 o'clock. And of course, at that point, all I could think of was, as soon as it's 12 o'clock, the fast is over, and I need to break the fast. Because I'm not a great faster. I remember when I was a little kid, on days like Yom Kippur, the idea that I had to fast that day made me so nervous. I would actually take breakfast earlier than on a normal day. So I was never like a great fan of fasting. To me, it was always, anyway. So then Prabhupada, it was an amazing revelation of Prabhupada's Krishna consciousness, because he had devotees read the Krishna book, and it just kept going on and on, like 12, 12:15, 12:30. And I was thinking, this is ecstatic. What time is it? And so it just kept going on and on. And we were all getting weaker and weaker, and Prabhupada was getting stronger and stronger. And he would like sat up straight on his Vyasasana, and he was just becoming, you could just see, he was becoming totally energized by hearing the Krishna book, and he was also fasting. And I was, sort of barely conscious. And then finally, it must have been like 1 or 1:30, Prabhupada said, all right, now you can take prasadam. But it was an amazing, it really showed me who is who in terms of Krishna consciousness. And then I had another ecstatic experience with Prabhupada during that same time. New Vrindavan, as you may know, is the nearest big city is Pittsburgh. It's about an hour and a half from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And so after the festival at New Vrindavan, everyone went to Pittsburgh, where the devotees had arranged a big program. They had the Radha Damodar party in those days was a musical, like a traveling theatrical musical, and so they were going to do they had booked a performance at this what's called the Syrian Mosque. It's this famous auditorium in Pittsburgh, and so they booked this big auditorium. They actually got people to come, and then Vishnu Jana was there and the other devotees, and they put on the show, and the Prabhupada was there. And so when we first arrived in Pittsburgh, the evening we first arrived in Pittsburgh, we were all in Prabhupada's room, and I was sitting right next to Prabhupada. I had this technique, by the way. I was famous or notorious among the GB sannyasis because when Prabhupada would go for walks, all these big leaders wanted to stand next to Prabhupada. And, a lot of them were bigger than me, and I was not, professionally trained in martial arts or anything. And so I couldn't really, and I didn't want to get in there like if it was in some kind of ice hockey tournament. So what I would do, and I was famous for this, I would go out around in front of Prabhupada, then just to the side, and then just start walking very slowly, and then they would catch up to me, and I would be next to Prabhupada. And I remember all these big leaders, sannyasis, they would just look at each other because they couldn't stop it because they didn't want to bother Prabhupada. So that's what I always do. So we were sitting in Prabhupada's room in Pittsburgh, and Prabhupada was preaching to the devotees. And at one point, he had to talk about some banking business because he was building temples in India and other places, temples that would save millions of people, and no one else really understood how to do it. So Prabhupada had to go over the banking things and book printing, and Prabhupada he didn't want to do it, but there was no one. We were all young, so he had to do all these things. And so I saw Prabhupada. He was talking. I was sitting next to him, and I noticed that he was talking about banking business. But he was in ecstasy. There were tears of ecstasy coming from his eyes. He was thinking of Krishna, and so just after that, he said, "Okay," and we all left. And of course, everybody was getting up and waiting to leave, and there was a crowd in his room. And so I just pretended like I was trying to, leave, but I was just really walking back and forth. So I wanted to be the last one in Prabhupada's room, which I was. So then, as I left Prabhupada's room, I remember I closed the door behind me, and I looked back, and Prabhupada was in this ecstatic mood, and someone brought him a little peacock feather, which was on his desk, and I remember this. He took the peacock feather, he thought everyone was gone. He was just like, sort of like hitting himself with the peacock. I mean, he wasn't like some kind of flagellation or something. He was just... And I could just see his deep ecstasy in Krishna consciousness, and I realized whether he was talking about Rasa Leela or talking about bank deposits, he was in the same ecstasy. And he saw Krishna in everything. I think I am a bit skeptical by nature. As you may have noticed, I have a certain rational tendency. And... which is wonderful because you can always find faults in other people and make yourself feel good. So it's invaluable as an aid to self-esteem to be very rational. But with Prabhupada, I spent a lot of time with Prabhupada. I wasn't in New York City. I wasn't one of the New York gang, but he was just always Krishna conscious. He was always completely Krishna conscious. And he was never really thinking about anything except his service to Krishna. And, sometimes he would joke, because you have to, he'd relax, light moments. But everything was always about the Sankirtan movement. And he was he really loved us as a spiritual father. I remember one time in 1970 when I came down, Prabhupada called to see me, wanted to see me, because he was pleased by some things I was doing. And so in those days, I think I've told the story, I used to, we just did Sankirtan, we didn't do book distribution then. And so the public had not come to fully love us the way they did when we, anyway. So we had, the big Sankirtan movement hadn't started yet, and so we would do Sankirtan. We would do Harinam all day, every day for hours and hours, and I was one of the Kirtan leaders, and I would play, we'd play the drum for hours, so the Kirtan leaders that play the drum would always, they put tape on their fingers, because we played the drum so much. And so one time, Prabhupada came, he arrived at the temple in L.A., and he stopped, and he said to me, "What's the matter? What's wrong?" And I didn't understand what he meant. I said, "What?" And he pointed to my finger. And I never forgot that, and I explained to him what it was. But here he was managing this whole worldwide movement. That was in 1970. We had centers in many places. And he was really seriously concerned about my finger, because I had tape on my finger. I remember one time during that same visit, I saw Prabhupada. He was angry, and he was talking to one of the ladies because he saw that she let her child run in the street. And she was trying to give some excuse, I don't know, I was doing this, but Prabhupada, he was really upset. He was really upset because he saw this child run in the street. And so that was Prabhupada. I mean, he was very much our loving Father. He was very much concerned about us. One time, another Vaishnavi lady wrote to Prabhupada and said that she was sort of in a conflict because she had a little child that, a child that needed her attention, but at the same time she really wanted to do deity worship, and it was almost, she was asking Prabhupada, like, how can I do my deity worship? And Prabhupada said, for a mother, he said, baby worship is more important than deity worship. And so he was, you hear all these stories like Prabhupada, like Prashant, he once said to me, eat what you like and it'll be good for you. In other words, follow you. Prabhupada was, he was very much a loving Father. We were in such awe of him that, for example, my own relationship with Prabhupada, it was only many years later that I realized that he was always he was always being very kind to me. He was even joking with me. But when I was young, I was so much in awe, like, oh my God, Prabhupada, that I couldn't really fully appreciate and understand just how nice he was being to me. Because in my mind, there was so much awe, I didn't realize that he was constantly inviting me to have just a more loving, personal relationship with him. So many times I'd enter the room, and I remember one time he actually almost like he was sort of laughing at my super serious attitude. And I came into Prabhupada's room, and he said to me, kind of with mock gravity, he said, so, what is your message? And then he took a flower off his desk and gave it to his servant and said, here, give this. He gave me a flower. So one time I went to see Prabhupada in New York, in our Brooklyn Center, and he had heard about my college preaching program. I'd written to him, and other people were talking about it. It's sort of a well-known program. And at that point, what was I? I guess maybe I just turned 24. Maybe I was 23, 24. Maybe still 23. And so I walked into Prabhupada's room just as he was finishing his breakfast prasadam, and he leaned back and said, oh, Hridayananda, Goswami, he said, you are actually traveling and preaching. I just sit here and eat. And where's Ramdas? Oh, there's a story for you. Then Prabhupada, he asked me about my preaching program, and I said, the professors, they don't understand the real essence. They don't really understand so well, the real essence. And Prabhupada actually hit his fist on the desk and said, they don't understand anything. And so I left Prabhupada's room, and I was feeling really great about myself. Like, I went there, and Prabhupada was so nice. He really appreciated what I was doing. So I was, like that old blues song, sitting on top of the world. And so that afternoon, I thought I'd go back and, get some more attention from Prabhupada. I mean, I wasn't thinking in such a crass, vulgar way, but I was, I wanted to go back and see Prabhupada again. But this time, I had a little bit of pride, and of course Prabhupada saw it immediately. And so a very funny thing happened. There was a young girl, I mean maybe she was like 18, 19 years old, devotee, in Prabhupada's room cleaning. She was cleaning the room, and so I was sitting there just waiting for Prabhupada to again say nice things to me. And of course he didn't. He was just watching this girl. I mean, with real love. He was just watching her clean, and he started talking to her, really kind of like a loving grandfather. And he said to her, "So, what is your name?" And he's just asking her questions. Where are you from? And I could just see he was just so pleased with her. It's just like a loving grandfather. Like he could, only had eyes for her. And he just completely ignored me. And I understood that at that moment, she was actually obviously more Krishna conscious than I was, because she was very, in the ISKCON hierarchy, I was Joe Goswami, I was big sannyasi, blah blah blah, and she was just some young girl cleaning Prabhupada's room, but she was obviously more Krishna conscious than me. She was really doing her service with devotion and love, and I was thinking I'm a sannyasi. And of course, which is the bodily concept of life. So at that point, he probably was much more pleased with her. And so I never forgot that. I thought that was a very good lesson also. So another incident happened in 1974. I've told the story many times, but I'll tell it again, because I don't know if Venu Gita has heard it. And that is, Prabhupada, the weather was very nice. It was New Vrindavan, which is West Virginia, in the hills, and it was August. So it was, the weather was nice, it was warm, and so Prabhupada would take his daily massage. The reason he took a massage every day is because a doctor told him he should for his health. And so he was taking his daily massage, and I was sitting there with him, and Prabhupada was, sitting there with his gamsha, he was sitting cross-legged on his mat. And there were these two little kittens playing near Prabhupada. And these were really, really little kittens. They were just tiny little kittens, probably, and they were wrestling. And of course, in those days, we were so immature, and so we had this idea, like animals. Because we thought that's Vedic culture means to be disgusted by anything other than human beings with tilak on. And so anyway, these two little kittens were wrestling, and they grabbed each other in such a way they actually formed like this perfect ball, and they rolled along, and they rolled right onto Prabhupada's lap, and they just kept wrestling and playing right on Prabhupada's lap. And I was thinking, oh my God, animals on the lap of a pure devotee. But then Prabhupada, to my surprise, actually acted like a normal human being. And he started playing with them. He just petted the kittens, and he was just laughing and he just acted like a normal person, unlike me. And then but what was interesting, what Prabhupada noticed, and the lesson he wanted to give, is that these kittens, they had complete confidence in Prabhupada. In other words, they had absolutely no fear. They were just playing and wrestling. They were just playing on Prabhupada's lap with complete confidence. And Prabhupada looked up at us and said, he mentioned that, how confident they were. And then he said, if you put your head in my lap and I cut your throat, that is the greatest sin. In other words, to abuse a position of authority, to have the confidence of another person, whether it's in a, it could be in a relationship, in a marriage, it could be guru disciple, it could be anything. But when there's a relationship where one person really puts their confidence in another person, and to betray that confidence in such a way that the other person is seriously harmed, Prabhupada said that is the greatest sin. And so that really made an impression on me. Also, one time Prabhupada was taking him aside. Then Prabhupada's servant then was Pushta Krishna, who then was a sannyasi. He was kind of like a big, strong guy. And he was giving Prabhupada a massage, and Prabhupada kept saying harder, especially on his back. He wanted it really he needed a deep tissue, hard massage. And then I remember Prabhupada said to him, no, Prabhupada was really getting him, tired of having to tell him hard. And he said, not like cotton swabs. Like little cotton swabs. And then Prabhupada turned him. He's a big guy, strong. Prabhupada turned him and he said, if you're not strong enough, call someone else. Because he really wanted a heavy massage. And then one day when he was taking his massage, I went and I sat next to Prabhupada, but because the land was slightly inclined, I was sitting a little bit higher than Prabhupada. You don't sit higher than the guru. He said it nicely. He didn't think I was, did something wrong intentionally. And so I just never forgot that, not to sit above the Guru. And so that was New Vrindavan with Prabhupada. And that was 1972. But in 1974, I was at GBC, so I saw Prabhupada in San Francisco. And then in 1975, in January, Prabhupada came to my zone, to Mexico and Venezuela. And I translated. Somehow by that time I'd learned Spanish well enough, so I did the translation for Prabhupada. And I think I remembered less of his lectures than anyone else in Mexico, because I was just so completely focused on translating that I... And then we flew to Caracas. I remember I bought Prabhupada a first-class ticket, because I thought, he's a pure devotee. And then that became the standard, actually. We started that. I remember buying a first-class ticket down to Mexico and then to Caracas. And then Prabhupada was so enthusiastic about getting his books out. We had just finished. I was in charge of the BBT for Spanish and Portuguese, and we just produced the first Bhagavatam in Spanish. And I wanted so much to give it to Prabhupada personally before he left my zone. And so just like here, the books arrived, they went into customs, and somehow we couldn't get them out, and Prabhupada was leaving. So I had, all the leaders that was in Venezuela, all the leaders there, just working on this, just somehow to get these books out. And so I went with Prabhupada in the car. I'll tell you one little story from Prabhupada when we drove away from the temple. We were in the hills there of Caracas, a beautiful view. Anyway, won't describe Caracas, but Los Chaguaramos. And so as we were driving away, the devotees were chanting and dancing and running after the car. And I remember Prabhupada said to me, that is the proper way. When the Guru comes, one should go as far as possible to meet him. And when he leaves, one should go as far as possible to say goodbye. I remember Prabhupada saying that. And so we got to the airport, and there was no book. I was hoping that we got to the airport, the book was there, and there was no book. And then Prabhupada, had called his flight, and he had to go through passport control. And I was just really disappointed. And then after Prabhupada had already gone through, the devotees came running up with the Bhagavatam. And so then, this was just like a movie. I'm from Southern California, so this was just like a movie. I was dressed, of course, my sannyasi attire, and I had my danda. And I took this Bhagavatam, and I didn't see anything, so I have to give this to Prabhupada. I ran right past all the airport police. I ran right through the passport control.
Slow motion running.
Yeah, and I remember I just kept running, and I ran past several checkpoints and police and this and that, and no one said a word to me. And of course, it was hard to notice me because I was in a sannyas dhoti with shaved head and a danda. So I just sort of blended into the Caracas airport, but. So I just ran past everyone. No one said a word to me. And I ran right into the departure gate, right up to Prabhupada, offered obeisance, and sat next to him. And said, Prabhupada, here's the Bhagavatam. And so Prabhupada, of course, was very, very pleased. And he took the Bhagavatam, he looked at it, and it's interesting because you always hear Prabhupada said this and that about sort of minor things or details. So Prabhupada, there was a rule then that that Prabhupada said he only wanted the Bhagavatam hardcover. He didn't want softcover Bhagavatams. But I printed it softcover because it was for Latin America, and I knew that people can't afford. I can't sell a lot of books. We can't sell a lot of books if they're hardcover. They're just sort of like basic Yiddische Kopf. So anyway, so we printed it softcover. And then I went to Prabhupada, and I'd written to Prabhupada and told him. He said, of course you can print a softcover. So it's and people were saying, no, Prabhupada said, but it was hello. It's a detail, and this is what we need. So Prabhupada was very pleased. So when I gave him the Bhagavatam, he said to me, read some of it. He wanted me to translate it back from Spanish. See what does it say? And I translated it back. He was completely satisfied because we actually began in those days what I called fidelity check. There were many foreign BBTs, but we were the first BBT to, after translating something, we would then do it backwards, in the sense of I would have someone read the Spanish to someone else who's watching the English. We would go forwards and then backwards to check it. And so we really had the most carefully translated foreign language BBT books in the world. And so when I read it back to Prabhupada, he was very pleased, and then they called his flight, and he left, holding the Bhagavatam in his hand. So that was Prabhupada's visit to Caracas. And I'll tell you another interest. Do you know the story about Santa Monica Park? No? Prabhupada, actually when they first moved into the Watsika Avenue Temple, Prabhupada would just walk in the neighborhood. Because it was sort of a lower middle class neighborhood, but kind of respectable when they moved in. And there were these little houses. And then the neighborhoods, changed a little bit, and then it was lower middle class. Some of the people were not so elegant in their behavior. So Prabhupada decided he would start walking away from Watsika. And so somehow or other, I don't know how they did this, but Prabhupada had a routine where one day he would walk in Rancho Park and one day in Venice Beach. And both those places, I grew up near Venice Beach, and my grandmother lived very close to Venice Beach, so that was like my childhood beach. So we would go and park in the same parking lot my mother would take me, and walk where I used to play as a little child with Prabhupada. And then the other day, Rancho Park was the park in our neighborhood. It was sort of a really very nice, very, very nice, sort of I guess you have to say upper middle class Jewish neighborhood. And Rancho Park was that was the park. And so I had this amazing experience of driving with Prabhupada in a car. I'd be sitting next to Prabhupada, driving past houses where I went to parties, parties, like young people go to parties. And so we'd actually drive by these houses, and I'm sitting next to Prabhupada, and I thought, oh my God, you've come a long way, baby, or something. So, I wasn't thinking those exact words, but, so we were driving with Prabhupada, and then I would literally walk with Prabhupada. I would walk with Prabhupada around my little league, like baseball fields where I played baseball, and past the pool where I used to swim, past the tennis courts where I played tennis, and just walk with Prabhupada. And one time, another revelation is one time we were walking in that park, Rancho Park, and Giriraj's mother came. Giriraj was with us, and he was brahmachari, of course, at that time. And we were walking, and someone said, Giriraj's mother is here. And so I still remember, I know exactly where it was in the park. And so Prabhupada turned, and of course everyone stopped. And she was about maybe 50 yards away. So Prabhupada was a gentleman, he just waited, and then she came. And then Prabhupada did something which amazed and astonished me, and sort of opened up new dimensions of spiritual life. And that is, even as a sannyasi, he shook hands with her. Because we had to say we had an immature understanding would be perhaps too generous. But Prabhupada was a perfect gentleman. He shook hands with Giriraj's mother, and we continued walking. So it was in that park actually, and then on Venice Beach. It was in Rancho Park, Venice Beach, that Prabhupada spoke the Life Comes from Life argument that became a book, Life Comes from Life. It was in that park and on that beach. And I remember so many times just walking just on that beach. And Prabhupada, he was kind of athletic actually, in the sense that Prabhupada liked to walk right next to the water, which I also do. And so, California, sometimes you get real waves. And so Prabhupada, we walking in Venice Beach right next to the water, and then occasionally you get this wave would come. And Prabhupada was always like the first to react. He had like these really fast reactions. And he would just laugh like a child, just like run from the wave. And I remember that he was, I just remember just walking up and down that beach with Prabhupada, and he would stop at a certain point. There's what you call breakers. At a certain point in the beach, they put this, all these big stones going out of the ocean to kind of break the tide. And so we'd sort of walk up to there and then walk back. And just so many times walking there, and also at the park with Prabhupada. I remember that I'd always go in the car with Prabhupada, and so it was actually the winter. There was a winter that time we were going to the park, and so the winter in LA is basically sort of like the winter in Tel Aviv, but in the morning, early morning, it can be a little chilly. especially for Prabhupada because he's from a tropical country. So it was sort of a bit of a cold winter. So Prabhupada, he would always go for his walk before the morning program. He would always go for his walk around 6:15, and then come back. And then when Prabhupada came back, he would walk into the temple, and the pujaris would open the doors. So it wasn't a specific time. It's whenever Prabhupada came back from his walk, they would open the deity doors and play Govindam, and then Prabhupada would give the class. So, but at this winter, because it was a little cold in LA, Prabhupada would go for his walk after the class when it was warmer. And so I remember, like, every day I'd go in the car and I'd sit next to Prabhupada in the car, and I'd always say, Prabhupada, that was a wonderful class. And so finally one day Prabhupada said, you always say everything's wonderful. You always say wonderful. And I realized that I was not being creative in my adjectives. So after that, every day I would find some other adjective, some other synonym for wonderful. So then actually it was in 1976. Anyway, so Prabhupada had this, here's a story involving Tamal Krishna Goswami. I think I already told the story, but I'll say it again. But Prabhupada, for years, that had been Prabhupada's routine, because often he would spend weeks in LA, like one day Rancho Park, one day Venice Beach. So in 1975, when they had that miraculous book distribution marathon where they produced all of Prabhupada's books in just a few weeks, and so I was in charge of Spanish BBT, so I wanted to take part, so we miraculously produced many Spanish books. And so to get we would actually work around the clock. When we were young, we were just so focused on our service to get these books out for Prabhupada. I would just work until I would just, sort of pass out, just fall asleep. And then I'd wake up and just keep working. And we just work around the clock like that to get the books out for Prabhupada. And so to get my rounds done, I would drive to this very beautiful park in Santa Monica, which is on a cliff. It's on a cliff maybe about, what would it be? Maybe 30 feet high, like 3 stories high. And you can literally see like 90 square miles of the ocean. So actually, there's points you can measure and calculate and everything. And so I used to walk to this beautiful park on the cliffs above the ocean. So when next time Prabhupada came to LA, which was in January, I wanted to take him to that park. And Radha Ballava Das Brahmachari, who was in charge of Prabhupada's walk, he was the walk manager, he told me, no, Prabhupada won't want to go there, because it took maybe 4 minutes longer to get there. 4 or 5 minutes longer. And I kept saying Prabhupada will like it. No, he won't like it. Prabhupada doesn't want to go there. So finally he said, okay, I want you to stop bothering me. We'll go one time. You'll see that Prabhupada doesn't like it. And then that's the end of it. So we got in the car that day. Everyone got their instructions, all the cars. We're going to the Santa Monica Park. So we drove there, and Prabhupada got out. He walked for a few steps. Prabhupada, he's really elegant. He had his cane. He would put his cane down when he wanted to say something. He'd stop, and Prabhupada stopped and said, this is the best place in Los Angeles to walk. And so after that, he actually never went back to Rancho Park or Venice Beach. And after that, every day he would go to Santa Monica. So then, after the Sankirtan competition of December of 75, I came to Los Angeles then to see Prabhupada. That's when that park thing happened. And Tamal Krishna Goswami came. You know this story. And Prabhupada he was so happy that because both of us had distributed so many of his books. And so we were walking through the park in Santa Monica. I could just see it. Tamal Krishna Maharaj was on one side of Prabhupada. I was on the other side of Prabhupada. And Prabhupada was, he's sort of like teasing Tamal. And he was laughing. He was saying, so, no one could defeat Radha Damodar, but he has defeated you. It's like, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to take that? So Tamal and I, of course, we were laughing, but Prabhupada was, I remember he said, I like this competition. So he was really happy. And he saw that Tamal and I were, like brothers. And so he was, he wanted that. He wanted that spirit to do more. So, anyway, a few conclusions about Prabhupada. Prabhupada had a determination, a sense of urgency about spreading this movement, which we really need to keep alive. When Prabhupada, of course, we were young, we were enthusiastic, but still, to have an intimate relationship with Prabhupada, we have to take very seriously his mission. We know, I mean, it's very famous that when Prabhupada left this world, that many devotees who had been very, quote unquote, very intimate with Prabhupada personally, didn't do so well. And those who really were focused on serving Prabhupada's mission often did better. So, in Israel and everywhere, that Prabhupada's inspiration, his determination, that we must find a way, and of course you have to be creative, we have to be intelligent, we have to find, we have to find what is appropriate in each country. To give an example of what is not appropriate in a particular country, this is a true story. I mean, who needs to watch movies when you belong to a religious institution? So, Prabhupada, a couple of devotees, including a sannyasi, actually went to South Korea to open up South Korea. And this is right in the middle of the Cold War. This is right in the middle of the Cold War, when, the real Cold War. And South Korea is, expects any day an invasion from the communist North Korea. And so the first little pamphlet the devotees published for South Korea during the Cold War was spiritual communism. But no problem, it only took 20 years to get back in the country. So obviously, we have to find an appropriate way to spread Krishna consciousness in every country. Israel is, without question, it's a very special country. It's unique in many ways. And you have a unique geopolitical, cultural, religious situation. But still, the determination is there to somehow or other find the way and to get that intelligence from Krishna to bring people the knowledge. It's not about getting people to change their religions. I mean, that sounds pretty tacky. It's not about that. It's about trying to simply give people knowledge, freely give people knowledge, so whatever their religion is, whatever their persuasion is, they can have a great life. Knowledge is knowledge, like we've said so many times. So, anyway, I guess I just want to again thank everyone here. This has been a wonderful experience for me, coming to Israel, and on behalf of all my good friends in Caesarea.
Truck drivers.
Well, most of whom are cats, actually, and a few truck drivers. Yes. But this is really a wonderful community, and it's been a really an unforgettable experience to get to know so many of you, and I certainly want to come again to get some more of that ISKCON prasadam. Who is it? Is a lady here? Who makes the ISKCON prasadam?
She's not here.
Oh, well, tell her that. Oh, your wife? Yeah, that was. Yeah, she was the first responder, on ISKCON, as I say. So anyway, I really am sincerely grateful to all of you. I don't take. All the kindness that's been shown to me. Tarani somehow got me here, as you know. When Krishna gives her a message, she carries it out, and so. I remember we went back and forth, and because I had so much inertia, because I actually hadn't left America. I hadn't left the country for about, 5 years or more, maybe 6 years, I think. I was just in my, I was just tired of traveling, and so, and so many times I would call Tarani, we'd Skype, and and the purpose of it was to explain to her why maybe it's not a great idea for me to travel, and she would always inform me that actually you are coming to Israel. And of course she was right. So Yeah, so it's really been a great pleasure for me to be here in such a wonderful Krishna conscious community. So, any questions? This is your chance to. If I can't answer your question, I get thrown back into a little barrel of water, right? Like a thing, where the guru sits in a chair, and if you can't answer the question. Yes.
I heard you saying in one lecture that everyone has the same access to Prabhupada.
Oh yes.
And but most of us never met him, so how can we access him or his mercy in the right way?
Yes. I may have told the story here before, but in 1970, when Prabhupada called, I went down to L.A. early 1970 to be initiated by Prabhupada, and by that time I had very clear realizations about Prabhupada's identity. I knew that he was actually seeing God, and which I found very impressive. And so then I was going to see Prabhupada, and I remember I was so nervous. I couldn't It was almost like too much. I'm going to see someone who sees God. And I remember I was just so astonished by this. And then we all lined up. In those days, Prabhupada's official Acharya car in his world headquarters was, again, actually a little Volkswagen, but a much older one than I had later. They had this little Volkswagen for Prabhupada. And so in the evening, he was coming for class, actually for the initiation ceremony. And he was going to drive up, and then we were all at the sidewalk. We were in the two rows, and I was literally almost fainting from the idea that I was going to see Prabhupada. And then the temple president, who saw Prabhupada every day, just rushed up to me with the garland. It was Gargamuni. He just said, "Here, put this on Prabhupada." And so then the idea that I was going to put a garland on Prabhupada, I literally almost did faint. But somehow I stood there. And so I was in that state of mind. I just turned 21. And Prabhupada is coming, I'm going to see Prabhupada. And then when he drove up, he was sitting in the passenger seat, obviously, of this little Volkswagen. And there was a street light right above us. And so when Prabhupada drove up, you could just see him very clearly through the windshield. And I had this very powerful realization that, oh, it's just Prabhupada. That I've been seeing him every day. That I've been seeing Prabhupada every day. And that was my realization, that I've been seeing him every day. And so, actually, even Krishna, it's like a little baby. For example, your mother can tell you a story that when you were just a baby, she was holding you. For example, I have an aunt, my Aunt Esther, who's really, really cool aunt. She was only about 10 or 11 years older than me, so she's almost like an older sister. And so she always tells me these stories. How, because when I was born, I think my mother's mother and her sort of moved in with us for a while to help take care of the kids. And she would tell me how I'd, get her up at night because I was crying or something, or just wouldn't let her stop playing with me. Because I was just like a little baby. And so what's interesting is that she would tell me all these stories. I don't remember it because I was just a baby. But it happened. I was with my mother. I was with my grandmother. I was with my aunt. Even though I didn't remember it, but I was with them. So the same way, we're with Krishna right now. That's the point. That as you grow in Krishna consciousness, you will understand that right now, right at this moment, you are with Krishna. And actually, you're even seeing Krishna. You're actually seeing Krishna right now. It's just like I was seeing my aunt or my mother, but I just didn't understand, aunt, mother, grandmother. I couldn't work it all out. But I was seeing them. I was seeing them. And so you're seeing Krishna right now. Because everything you think you're seeing, whether it's the wall or another person, Krishna is there. He's actually there. And it's a manifestation of Krishna, of his energy. So you're seeing Krishna at every moment. And as far as Prabhupada is concerned, as I explained before, I gave a whole lecture on this that went ISKCON viral. Prabhupada, of course, he was our guru, and and he explained the etiquette of the guru. But Prabhupada's real self-understanding, the way he saw himself, in the first place was as the founder Acharya of ISKCON. That's the title he put in his books. His books were, everything to him. He didn't put in his books A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Diksha Guru of the ISKCON devotees. That's not what he put on his books. He put founder Acharya. And when Prabhupada had to be introduced, like had to write a letter of introduction to some important person, like some government official or whatever, he never wrote, allow me to introduce myself, I am the Diksha Guru of ISKCON. He never said that. He said, allow me to introduce myself, I am the founder Acharya of ISKCON. Prabhupada was a guru, but he said he wanted all of his disciples and their disciples to eventually become gurus. He never asked anyone to become a founder Acharya. So the primary position of Prabhupada, the most important position of Prabhupada among his many positions, is that he is the founder Acharya, the one who created, as Krishna's instrument, the institution, the process for delivering this planet. And so therefore, every one of us has the same relationship with Prabhupada as founder Acharya. Obviously there's an etiquette. So if someone is my disciple, they should first feed me. I'm just kidding. Before everything, feed me. Anyway, just kidding. So if someone is my disciple, obviously there's an etiquette. There's an etiquette to go through a guru. But still, once you honor that etiquette, everyone's on the same before Prabhupada. If Prabhupada sees that you've honored that etiquette, then you have the same access to Prabhupada as any Prabhupada disciple. You have the same access. Because what determines the intimacy of your relationship with Prabhupada is not, that, okay, I was born too late. That would be absurd. That's a material consideration. The fact that you're born in this generation or that generation, that's just external. That's not spiritual. What actually determines your relationship with Prabhupada is how much you love him and how much you serve him. If you step forward and say, yes, I understand that you gave your life to save me, now I'm going to give my life to help you. It's actually that consciousness. And giving your life doesn't mean anything like immature or cultish. It means obviously you keep yourself, because, we used to think it did. We have to be healthy, physically, emotionally, intellectually, and spiritually healthy. You're not supposed to risk or damage your physical health, your emotional health, your intellectual health, or your spiritual health in the name of surrender. But what you are supposed to do is keep yourself healthy, and to keep yourself healthy emotionally, it means there's like 4 ashrams, brahmachari, brahmacharini, or married, or vanaprastha, retiring, or sannyasi, and so on. So everyone has to locate themselves. It's like on a map. There's two, there's the vertical axis and the horizontal axis. And if you have a vertical and a horizontal axis, you can locate a position. And so in the same way, if you have a proper varna, in other words, an occupation, what's your career, what's your profession, what do you do in the world? And so if you found the natural, correct profession, career for yourself, and you figured out how you plan to deal with, basically, human sex desire. Because, in other words, should you get married? And it's not that, actually, according to the Bhagavatam, householder life is really above brahmachari life. Because, on the universal form, it doesn't mean brahmacharis can't be great devotees, but, so it's not a status thing. It's not a status thing like this ashram is better than that ashram. It's just a question of finding the right one. If you say, what is the best ashram? It's the right one for you, based on your nature. So if you're in the right ashram, the correct ashram, then you're as good as anybody else who's also in the correct ashram, even if it's a different one. So if you locate yourself Varna and ashram, then you know where you fit into society. You know where you fit into the world. And so it's in that position that you then give yourself to Prabhupada. You don't give give your life to Prabhupada before you have a life to give. You can't have an unstable, artificial, neurotic life and then just dump it all on Prabhupada. I mean, of course, you can ultimately dump anything, but the point is, have a healthy life. Be emotionally healthy. Financially healthy, if possible. That seems to be sometimes a challenge for Vaishnavas, but we should be financially healthy, emotionally, in every way, healthy, strong, satisfied. And then that life, use it for Prabhupada, for Krishna. So if you do that, if you love Prabhupada, if you really try your best within your position, if you try your best to serve Prabhupada, then you can be as dear to Prabhupada as anyone else who tries their best to serve Prabhupada. As the founder Acharya, because that's really... Sometimes, I've often said this, sometimes I think the younger generation of devotees is funny. I always consider myself extremely youthful, and I am spiritually, but materially I think it's becoming hard to convince people, especially when they keep calling me grandfather. At first I thought they're just delusional, but then I looked at a picture of myself and I thought, no. Anyway, so the idea is that let's say you're right on a mountain, because I mean in America, you drive through over the Rocky Mountains from Utah to Colorado, or from Colorado to Utah, also Montana or Wyoming. Anyway, so when you drive through the Rocky Mountains, often the highway is really high up. Like a certain point, the highway itself is 10,000 meters, maybe 3,400 meters up, or 3,000, just the highway. And so you're up in these big mountains, and it just looks like hills. They just look like hills. But then when you drive 10 miles away from the mountains, or 20 miles away, you see, oh my God, these are really big mountains. But you don't see it when you're on the mountain. So I've often thought that in some ways, the newer generation's devotees, sometimes they can see Prabhupada better than the older generation, because they actually have a better perspective. So becoming a pure devotee, becoming very dear to Prabhupada, knowing Krishna, it has nothing to do with the body. It's not about what gender your body is. It's not about what generation you're in. It has nothing to do with that. Because the relationship between you and Krishna is in the heart. All of us are in the heart right now. We're just sort of doing business as material bodies. But actually all of us, the soul is in the heart. Krishna is there too. Probably a little bored. But Krishna is also in the heart. And it's about the soul turning to Krishna. It's about you or me. It's about turning to Krishna and giving yourself to Krishna. In that sense, I mean, obviously, if you really do that, it will be reflected in some way in your external behavior, but ultimately, it's an internal spiritual act. And it has nothing to do with what kind of body you have. It has nothing to do with that. It's about the soul inside the body turning to Krishna. So again, any one of us, any soul in the world, in any kind of body, can become the greatest devotee of Krishna. For example, 5,000 years ago when Krishna appeared, the greatest devotees were the gopis. I mean, in terms of socio-geo-economic political affairs, they were not very important people. There were all these big kings and rulers and armies and rich people and this and that, and they were just these girls who milked cows. And, girls who milk cows, even today in Israel, are probably not internationally famous. And so And yet the gopis were actually the greatest devotees of Krishna, and great kings would come and just and offer them all respect. And even Brahma, the creator of the universe, said he wanted to take birth as grass in Vrindavan, so the gopis would walk on him and he could get their mercy by contact with their feet. And this is Brahma. So there's no material qualification. It doesn't matter what kind of body you have. Anyone at any moment can turn to Krishna and turn to Prabhupada. So, anything else? It's our Friday special.
Thank you so much for expanding our understanding of Krishna consciousness and how to approach the public with a more sane and human way, so that we hope very much that we should not just implement it, but it will come and help us to do it better and better and better again. Thank you very much. Really, seriously, you endeared yourself on us very much. Hare Krishna.